And this session is to put to the girls, the ladies, questions on what can be done to improve recruitment and to bring ladies into this profession. It's a very important profession, and I've chaired 50 of these conferences over the last 13 years, and I always look around and make a comment: there's not enough ladies in the audience. I'm pleased to see a lot today. That's good. Maybe it's because we've got this session that's attracted them. But let's have a go. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Welcome to this conference. I've got a number of questions that I will lead on, and maybe it will prompt the audience to raise questions as well. So I'll kick off. What are the issues and challenges that you face on a daily basis as women in this industry?
Well, we were just, before we get into that, we were just having a conversation at the back that, like, we really prefer panels that have men on them as well if we're doing a women's panel, because men need to be involved in the conversation. And I think a big challenge in the industry at the moment is a lot of men feel like they can't join this kind of conversation. So a lot like to swing their dick around, but a lot do really really want to get involved in the conversation. They do really want to make a difference, but they feel like they can't, especially if they're a white man, because they feel like, actually, I don't have a voice, and if I say anything, I'm a bigot. So we always like to try and get a diverse panel, but yeah, so I think that's a huge barrier to the industry changing, that a lot of men don't feel like they can say anything, they can make a difference. Therefore, it becomes siloed, and this whole conversation is amongst women, so it doesn't move forward. So I think that, for me, that's a huge barrier to improvement. What do you think?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I've been involved in some conversations and panels where we've been talking about workforce, actually, generally, not just diversity. And there's definitely a reticence there. I think they feel like they're going to say the wrong thing or something like that. And I think, we need to encourage this conversation a lot more. So I'm not sure how much debate there's going to be today, because hopefully we'll all be agreeing with one another. But it's great to be chatting about this.
Got me with you today,
Absolutely.
so you're not alone.
Yes. Okay.
I agree with both of the ladies, what they said. I come from a very male-dominated profession, so as a female in cybersecurity and law enforcement, it was doubly as hard. But yes, the men do need to be involved in the conversation, because where I was at, there weren't very many women, period.
What I was remiss in doing is not introducing the three lovely ladies. Eliza May Austin, who is the founder and director of Ladies of London Hacking Society. Annabel Berry, CEO Sapphire. And Stacy Aruda, executive director of SL ISAO.
Can I just say, I'm also the CEO of that security company. It's not on there for some reason. Just putting that out there. Everyone's just like, okay.
Okay. What part can men play in helping more women into security? What are the barriers we've got to break?
I think we've just discussed that, haven't we?
Yeah, I think, but I think the main thing I come across now, I don't come across very many people who have got real bias, conscious bias anymore. You encounter it now and again. There are pockets still around, but it's mainly unconscious or subconscious bias that we come across. And so I think having these conversations, and talking about the issues and the bias that we do encounter, I think, openly, because quite a lot of people don't realise it. And when we have these conversations, people sort of are suddenly more aware of the things that perhaps they're holding. So I think being part of that. The other thing I tend to see is that at the very top of an organisation, there's definitely a drive for diversity, and I tend to see more issues lower down in an organisation at varying management levels. And then that causes the harm, because obviously those are the people that tend to be running teams and things like that. So I think it's not just mandating within an organisation that there needs to be a diversity policy, but it's actually helping the management teams to understand what that means and to be aware of the things that perhaps they have bias. And by the way, women have just as much unconscious bias of other women in the workforce as men do. So it's across all teams. So we just need to, I think, talk about this a lot more and talk about the things that are the obstacles. And I don't think that just is around attracting women into the industry, but it's also retaining women. There's a high percentage of women who come to the industry. Eliza kind of opened my eyes to this. I've been along to some of the Ladies of London Hacker Society meetings, and I think it's a fantastic meetup that Eliza's created, and really behind what she's doing, the team there are doing. And there are a lot of women who are coming into the industry and leaving quite quickly. And I think we also need to be talking about why that is as well, because it's hard enough attracting talent. Don't know anyone here is involved in recruiting in the industry. It's phenomenally hard. So if we've got good people coming in, we need to make sure that we are helping them to want to stay. And there are, some issues around why people are leaving that we need to
I
out.
put it to you that the issue is far wider than that. We're talking about employment of people that are qualified, but it's getting people into the qualification system in the universities to take on computer science degrees, etc.
I agree with that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step on you, but I think it needs to be encouraged earlier on in school. If you find something that you really like, you need to stick with it and push forward. I think that a lot of people, when they get into school, they don't know what it is they want to do, and they're encouraged into directions where the university thinks or someone thinks that that person needs to go. But with the FBI, we would tell prospective hires, look, you need to get a degree in something that you really enjoy, and if you really enjoy cybersecurity, push forward on it. Don't let anybody get in your way.
Do you need a degree though?
Right, because they're living with it every day with social media. IT is there in the hand 24 hours a day.
I think there's 2 points. There's one, things are changing in schools now. So, I mean, I don't have any kids, but I know people that have kids are saying, like my kid's doing programming now and whatnot, and that's ace. But why do we care about university? Why do we care if someone's got a degree or not? It shouldn't matter. It's not a lot of it's not worth the paper it's written on, especially in cybersecurity. It's such an evolving industry. It's such a progressive industry. It's constantly changing. Every year, what you just learn is out of date, potentially. So, I mean, I've done a degree myself. I did digital forensics, and it's out of date. It's massively out of date if you're not using it every day. So I think we've got one of the last bastions in this industry of you can get where you want to get based on merit, based on skill, based on taking opportunities that are presented in front of you, and creating your own opportunities. You really don't need to go to university for this. It's not like you're doing medicine.
And I agree. I was reading a report just recently from Stanford University, and it was saying 65% of cybersecurity professionals believe the best place to learn is on the job. And I'm also of the view that you don't necessarily need a computer sciences background to be in the industry. I don't. I've got a degree in English, and I did my dissertation on Jane Austen, which is about far removed from cybersecurity as you can get. So I don't think we do. And also we need a variety of thinkers in the industry. The challenges that we used to have years ago, which is build the perimeter, build the wall, be able to configure firewalls and, read logs and et cetera. Those days, yes, those things are still needed, but actually we are facing new challenges in the industry, and we need people who can communicate, who can read and understand data, and that isn't necessarily come with the computer science degrees. And it's still sad, really, because I think the most heated debates I've seen at some of these conferences have, been whether CISOs need to come from a technical background or not. And one of the biggest issues I see with the CISO community and people heading up security within organizations is being able to communicate with boards. And that means being able to talk in the language of business and risk, which doesn't necessarily have to come from a technology background. So we need to kind of get away from, I think, having to have certain things or a degree, completely agree, to get into the industry. Because we're putting barriers up for ourselves. So I don't.
Can I just say, I think if a company has got on a job description that you need to have a degree in computer science background and you need to have achieved a first, what you're actually saying is you need to have been in a position where you can afford to go to university, and you probably need to have been in a position where you didn't have to work so that you could achieve a first. So what we're actually doing there is excluding a shit ton of people based on economic background and age, because if you're a little bit older and you've got a family or a mortgage, you're not really in a position to go to uni. So if you're wanting to attract people and you're thinking, why can't I, have a look at your job description and see who you're excluding just from what you're asking for.
Eliza and I were on a panel about this earlier. Funnily enough, we get to ask a lot about the question of diversity at various events. That's a really good point about job descriptions and recruitment. So there is a statistic that most men, whether or not they tick all the boxes of the requirements for a job, will put themselves forward for a job. Most women, if they don't tick all the boxes, probably won't. So I'm not saying that, leave off a whole bunch of stuff on the job adverts that you don't need, but have a look and see exactly, only put on there the things you exactly need. Don't add in things that are nice to have, because you will get a wider pool of people applying for jobs if you do that. And I think there's a lot of unnecessary requirements that we're putting in on job descriptions. And there are organisations that I know who have really changed that up over the last couple of months and are seeing a much bigger pool of people across the board applying for roles, men and women, tech background, non-tech background, and that's what we need ultimately. So,
Stacey, would you like to answer that?
Sure. So to clarify my point, I think we need to encourage kids, teenagers, young adults to pursue what it is that they really enjoy, because they're going to be doing whatever it is for 30, 40 years. And if you have someone who really enjoys computer security, coding, finding the bad guy, whatever the aspect of cybersecurity is, we need to encourage them to push forward. I think a lot of times, when children are young or when they're figuring out what they want to do, and they say, oh, well, I like so-and-so. Well, they're deterred away from that. And I think we need to encourage more of that creativity. And I definitely agree with what you say with regard to hiring folks that don't have degrees. I'm a member of a group with a bunch of young technical folks that don't have degrees, but they're way smarter, and I would put them up against anybody that has a degree. And I think you're absolutely correct with the fact that job postings and descriptions need to be changed to encompass those folks.
Thank you. I'm going to look to the audience now. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to ask a question? Here in the front.
John Palmer, Rockthorn Solutions. I wanted to ask the panel, once you've got your pile of CVs or applications on the table, how are you going to whittle them down, and how are you going to ensure that you choose the best person for the role?
Question, Annabel?
Well, in the same way as I would, I'm looking I believe in hiring on merit, absolutely. I want the best person for the job, and for me that will be, depending on what the role is, depending on whether it's more experienced or whether it's not experienced, whether they fit in with my company culture, whether they don't, what kind of drive they have internally. I'm not looking for, looking to fill certain quotas for roles. I just want to encourage more people to come forward for jobs, and we are seeing that within my business. I don't know whether having a larger amount of female leaders in the organisation encourages people to come towards us a little bit more. I don't know, but it was in the same process as you would do when you're hiring for the best people. Is looking through CVs, looking at getting people in interviews. We have a really rigorous interview process, lots of different stages, and it gives people the opportunity who perhaps don't demonstrate themselves well in the first interview to come back and give them a chance for us to get to know them. We've really slowed down our process, actually. We were rushing our recruitment, and I think there's a real danger of doing that because you've got roles to fill. We've really slowed it down and make sure that we try and get the right people. And we've got a very high retention of staff within the business for that reason. So we don't tend to get people who come in and then leave.
Stacey?
I'm not involved in hiring, so I'm really not the best person to answer this question.
We had a really good conversation a few months back, me and Annabel, about work ethic and how you get to the crux of someone's work ethic from an interview or a CV. And you were saying that there's some really good questions around, how old were you when you first got a job? Did you work while you were at uni, if you went to uni? What have you been doing, like, when you've not been in the cybersecurity industry? Doesn't matter if someone was like a waiter or a cleaner. If someone's got a good work ethic, that's going to penetrate throughout your team, and people are going to have to catch up with that person. So, yeah, I think if you can get to the crux of someone's work ethic, I think that's really important personally.
Ethic and enthusiasm. And a willingness to learn. I mean, isn't that what we all want? We want people in our teams who want to learn, because they're not going to come in. We're not going to get fully formed IT security professionals with years of experience, because they're just not out there. So we need some people who are, are smart, enthusiastic, willing to learn, are switched on to the kind of company culture you have, in terms of, customer experience or being able to, good communicators. I think it's just, throwing a little bit more open out there. So, yeah.
Another question for the audience. Somebody had their hand up down there. There we go. Charles.
Thank you. So I spend a lot of time recruiting or trying to hire people, mostly in technical roles. And I really take your point about the sort of unconscious bias against women in the workplace. I think I've seen that firsthand, and I think I've seen it manifest in things like pay inequality and stuff like that. But what I struggle to understand and get my head around as a hirer is we don't get women applicants for our jobs. I mean, really, it's very uncommon. And we have very exciting, very capable women leaders in our business that are visible. They're out there. I don't think the business is kind of overtly chauvinistic in any way that a recruit would see. But the CVs I just don't see them. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts as to how what we as a business can do, or why that's not happening.
I mean, I don't know generally as sort of in general tech, but I suppose for security, I think, again, I was reading a report, I think 89% of people who apply for jobs in the industry are men. So that's a really, really high percentage. And I think it's partly to do, I think, with the conversation we were having earlier about the requirements. People think that they need certain things and they're barriers. And I think that's why some of the work that Eliza's doing is crucial, because actually a lot of the people come along to the meetup don't come from a technology background, but are really interested in getting into cybersecurity and what they need to do to be able to do that. And then it's a support network who can support and give each other confidence about going for jobs, or making sure that people are aware that there are job roles and things like that. But I think there's definitely a confidence issue, I think, where people putting themselves forward for jobs. And I think talking more generally about some of the skills that we need so that people can identify with perhaps something that they think they can bring to a role, or where other roles perhaps translate. Talking a little bit more about where people might have previous experience that type of thing is invaluable for this type of role, rather than it being a straightforward, usual tech recruitment. So I think there's work to be done the other side, and I think that's where networks and things like that really come in, and mentoring and support programs. So I mentor a lot of people outside of work, just as, to try and help. And that's the biggest thing I see is confidence. It's not ability, for sure. So I think we just need to be talking about it a bit more, and not to put barriers up. I think there's still a lot of people talking about computer sciences and tech roles and degrees and things like that. And I think a lot of people think automatically they need to be coders or something, or
it's not just that. It's like there's that, but also, if you think about it, girls notoriously do really well at school. And the reason they do really well at school is because they follow the rules, they know the boundaries, they stay within those boundaries, and they achieve really high, they achieve higher than boys. Then they go into university and the same thing happens. More females go to university, then when they're there, they achieve really high. Then they go into the workplace and there isn't those boundaries and there isn't those same rules. So I think in an industry like information security, where it's so fluid and there's not many constraints around roles. So if you're an incident responder, you could be doing SOC work, you could also be doing forensics, you could also be doing like on-prem, off-prem, there's loads of different things. And I think because it's not very well defined, which for me that's the beauty of the industry, women can't align themselves to a role, they can't see the progression routes, and these are things that are really important to women, in my experience. So I think the reason the Hacking Society does so well is because we try and add some skeletal sort of infrastructure around those roles. So explaining exactly what penetration testing is, explaining exactly what an incident responder that's in a forensics environment does. Those things sort of add context to roles that are so airy-fairy and seemingly don't really exist. You can be a cybersecurity consultant doing what exactly? Well, you do whatever it is you do when you get into that building or whatever. So I think that's something that's really off-putting to women because you can't measure yourself against it. You can't think, okay, I'm ready now, I'm good enough now, I can apply for that now, because you can't if you don't really know if you meet any of those criteria, and those criteria are hard to sort of solidify. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, so I think that's the wider picture of why a lot of women don't apply for roles, because they think, oh, I need to get some certifications and then I'll be qualified to be an incident responder. No, if you can do forensics, you don't, like, if you can image a drive and you can navigate that drive and find what you need to find in it and disprove and evidence things and write reports, you can do that job. You don't need X, Y, Z. But I think that's, for me, a huge issue.
Okay. Would it help if on executive boards of companies there's more diversity, because a lot of the boards are male orientated? If there were women on these boards, wouldn't be that an incentive for people to join your company because there is a career path identified by somebody very senior on the board?
It depends, doesn't it, really? Because there's issues with that in itself. Like, if you're just going to stick a load of women in a boardroom, are they there? Because there's always going to be that question, did they get that position, did they get that high up because they're brilliant, or because they were pushed there because they're female and we want to attract more females? And that's like really hard to get your head around as a woman, going into work, being the only female, which has happened to me pretty much everywhere I've worked, and having that seed of doubt in the back of your mind. Do people really think that I don't deserve the role that I've got? Or they'll get drunk and say, oh, you only got that promotion because you're a woman, and stuff like that. So I think it makes sense what you're saying about having women in the boardroom, but there's also that problem that we've discussed before about some women feel like, I am the token in this boardroom, therefore I have to hold on to it, and I will flick away any other woman that tries to get near it. Or I had to go through this, so you have to go through this. And they don't actually make it any easier because they're one of the boys. So there's loads of differences.
I agree with you, and I think that if there's going to be, or when there is a woman in the boardroom, that the person has to be qualified, and the person has to have earned that position, because it doesn't do us any good if there's a woman in the boardroom that doesn't know what she's doing or doesn't deserve to be there. So going back to the last question, I think mentoring is extremely important. So we can take these young women and explain to them or help them build a career path that they really enjoy, and therefore they're set up to succeed and actually one day get into the boardroom.
I completely agree. I mean, 80% of CEOs globally have been mentored. Only 4% of CEOs come from a technology background, so you can do the math. There is only 4% globally of female CEOs, so you kind of, in terms of some percentages, 4%.
Okay. Time is marching on.
Yeah.
I'll take one more question from the audience. At the back right there.
Okay, thanks very much. My name's Darlin Basu. I'm the chairman of a couple of groups in the British Computer Society, and also events director for ISACA London chapter, which many of you will know as being to do with risk, audit, security, cybersecurity. So my comment is that what you're illustrating is that this is a multi-dimensional issue. I think it's just part of a bigger issue. We in cybersecurity are running right towards a big crunch where we have insufficient resources. So we need to attract more. But we're poor at communications in general. That's why I think what we need to do is for cybersecurity to launch a big marketing and advertising initiative, board-led, and to attract more people, especially from schools, and in there to say, and everybody is welcome, and we will have roles for all of you, male and female, LGBT, etc., because that's where we need to head. Now, just one final closer on that. I've run a number of events called Womenspiration. I won't explain what that's about. And the speakers are primarily women, but the interesting thing is that almost all of them have reported that the people who come to network with them afterwards are both male and female. I think we can all help by going back to our organizations and asking two questions. How many women are there in this organization? Number one. Number two, why?
Thank you.
What do you
for that
think?
question. Quickly, ladies.
I had something to say and then it left my brain. But essentially, I think that rather than just concentrating on kids, we should be concentrating on adults that are already out there, they're already able and willing, and they just need to recognise that they can cross-train the skills that they've got. Yeah, you know, concentrating on kids, that's fantastic. You know, that's going to do us a great job in 10 years' time. But right now, no, I think we need to be cross-training people that are already out there and interested.
I would agree about a campaign, a general campaign, I mean, you know, about the industry. I mean, I work with a lot of educators, and cybersecurity is not on the agenda for most schools I come across, or head teachers at all. It's only in pockets and associations like Teen Tech and things like that, and what the NCSC are doing. But in my experience, the general public don't know about NCSC. Only people within the industry have typically heard of it, and the conversation needs to be on a much wider platform outside of just the people in this room.
Excellent. Stacey, last comment?
I agree, and there are a number of programs in the U.S. for adults to cross-train over into cybersecurity that are funded programs, especially funded programs for veterans. So there is a concentration on moving people into cybersecurity jobs without degrees, and I think that's very important as well, because I don't know, I read something the other day with the glut is very large, and we need to get people into these jobs so we can protect our networks, because the bad guys are working together, trust me.
On that note, I'd like to draw this session to a close. I'd like to thank ladies, all three of you, Eliza, Annabel and Stacey. Thank you very much for giving your views. It behoves on everybody in this room to do more to attract ladies into this profession. They are equally as competent as us men. Go out there, spread the message. Thank you very much indeed, ladies.
Thank you.